Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. My name is of course Cameron and welcome back today to another video. Thought we'd just do a little video, 10-15 minutes, just talking about Dominic Calvert-Lewin. We're going to title it the Dominic Calvert-Lewin Conundrum because I feel like this is a conversation that a lot of Evertonians are having at the moment, but a conversation that is constantly being filled with one thing or another that doesn't really have any substance or any real sort of, any real sort of involvement in what is actually going on with Dominic Calvert-Lewin at the moment. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the actual issue with Dominic Calvert-Lewin and what is going on with him and his injury problems at Everton. This is something we've spoken about before on a live stream and something that we've mentioned a couple of times when people have asked me about Dominic Calvert-Lewin and my thoughts on Dom. And obviously, whenever we've had news that he's had an injury setback or that he's picked up another injury or that he won't be available for the game that we maybe thought he would be available for. And I just thought we'd sit down and we'd do a little 10-15 minute video just having a conversation about Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Now, one thing I do want to say before we get into this video and this discussion, and that is that everything I'm about to say about Dominic Calvert-Lewin and about his situation and about my opinion on what Everton should now do with Dominic Calvert-Lewin or how Everton should handle this Dominic Calvert-Lewin situation, none of this has got anything to do with A, what Dominic Calvert-Lewin wears, or B, what Dominic Calvert-Lewin decides to do with his spare time. Because I feel like whenever Dominic Calvert-Lewin is brought up at the moment, we have the quite obvious issue that he's really struggling with injuries at the moment, and it's quite evident that his body, for one reason or another, just isn't cooperating with what it needs to do to be able to play at the highest level for Everton Football Club and to be able to give Sean Dyche and us Evertonians what we need from him. And that sort of conversation is always mixed with what Dominic Calvert-Lewin decides to wear, how he decides to dress, his style, his fashion, what he decides to do with his spare time, who he decides to go on holiday with, what, advertising campaigns he decides to do when he's not playing football. And I feel like I was about to say they're separate issues, but they're really not, because all of that stuff isn't an issue whatsoever. It really isn't. The issue at hand here is Dominic Calvert-Lewin's injury problems, his constant injury setbacks, and Everton's negligence in A, realising that Dominic Calvert-Lewin is now a player who Everton simply cannot rely upon, and B, not replacing him because of that fact. It's got nothing to do with the way in which he dresses or what he decides to do in his spare time. I couldn't care less if Dominic Calvert-Lewin wears an astronaut suit when he's sitting around the house. I don't care whether Dominic Calvert-Lewin is doing adverts for shaving products or whether Dominic Calvert-Lewin is doing adverts for Aldi or whether Dominic Calvert-Lewin is doing adverts for, how to speak 15 different languages in less than 6 months. I really, really do not care. In the same way as I wouldn't care if Dwight McNeil was doing it. I wouldn't care if Jordan Pickford was doing it. I wouldn't care if John, who lives down the end of our road, was doing it. I just simply do not care about the way in which Dominic Calvert-Lewin dresses, the way in which Dominic Calvert-Lewin, is putting himself on magazines, or the adverts that Dominic Calvert-Lewin is partaking in, and I feel like this is becoming a bit ridiculous now, because whenever Dominic Calvert-Lewin has an injury setback, instead of the focus being on the injury setback, it's all of a sudden on, how come he's doing adverts then in his spare time? Or what, the problem is he's dressing like this or he's dressing like that. It isn't. A, that isn't a problem whatsoever, and B, that's got absolutely nothing to do with his problem, which is of course his injuries and ultimately his his inability to get to the level that we need him to get to. And that obviously agenda isn't helped by absolute idiots like Simon Jordan coming out on national television or national radio, and using those types of criticisms against Dominic Calvert-Lewin for, a reason as to why he's not on the pitch, or using words like the handbag carrier or whatever. Simon Jordan has once again embarrassed himself, as if he couldn't embarrass himself enough by being a failed football club owner who lost over £100 million and going on national radio trying to tell other football club owners how to run their business, because that's just like going to a cafe and getting an absolutely woeful sausage on toast, and then going to another cafe and in the back you see the original chef from the first cafe telling the new chef how to cook his butty. Well, no, yours was shite, so don't give any advice on how to do it properly because you can't even do it properly. So this agenda of why we should all be concerned about what Dominic Calvert-Lewin wears or what Dominic Calvert-Lewin does with his spare time isn't helped by, as I said, idiots in the media who are coming out and using phrases and words such as Simon Jordan when there's simply no need to do so. It's completely unprofessional, and he's made himself look like an absolute blurt by doing it because there's no need to do it. He could have said, once Sean Dyche gets Dominic Calvert-Lewin fit, Everton will be better, but he didn't. He tried to be funny, he tried to be snide, he tried to have a laugh, and really he's just come across looking like an absolute plant pot, which isn't the first time Simon Jordan has come across looking like an absolute plant pot on national radio either, to be honest. But anyway, as I said, those things, are not issues and shouldn't be issues, because if Dominic Calvert-Lewin was scoring 25 goals a season for Everton, then those things wouldn't even be discussed. They wouldn't even be spoken about. So the fact that he isn't, again, means that those things aren't the problem, because they wouldn't be the problem if he was playing well. The problem, and the thing we should be focusing on, is why Everton are so reliant on Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Now, this is something, as I said, I've mentioned numerous times on this channel and I've spoken about numerous times in isolation. For me, Everton should have had this stance in the summer. They really should have had this stance in January, and it baffles me how they still haven't got this stance. Everton have to replace Dominic Calvert-Lewin. It's as simple as that. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, now through no fault of his own, by the way, because he doesn't decide if he's injured. He doesn't decide that, he's going to turn up insane and he's going to feel a problem on his hamstring that's going to keep him out for the next 2 weeks, or he's going to have a really bad leg injury that's going to practically keep him out for an entire football season. He doesn't decide that. His body decides that. Now, are there mitigating circumstances? Is he maybe doing it too much insane? Is he maybe not giving himself enough rest? Potentially, but we don't know that for sure. So he isn't deciding, I don't want to play football. Personally, for my opinion anyway. Now, I know there's this discussion online about, obviously he put out the statement after Crystal Palace about struggling with his mental health, and then people are putting one and one together and making 14 and saying, oh, he's not fit and he's had to put this statement out so he doesn't want to play football, he's not interested, he doesn't like it. Again, it's complete sort of hearsay and things that may not be the truth. As far as we know, the truth is Dominic Calvert-Lewin is injured because he's picking up injuries and saying them through no fault of his own. Now, as I've just said, although it's no fault of his own, that doesn't mean that Everton can be complacent with our sort of plan for Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And that's exactly what Everton have been for the last 12 months, in my opinion. They've been complacent. And in football, there's no room for complacency, because when you are complacent, you get left behind. And that's what Everton have done. Everton have been left behind through their own complacency and through the negligence of the people in charge towards our football club. Now, we've spoken countless amounts of times about the board's failings in terms of replacing Richarlison, in terms of understanding the position we were in last season and what needed to change in order to not be in the position this season. We've spoken a million times about that, but one thing that isn't spoken enough is about the board's negligence surrounding Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Any other football club, I firmly believe, or most other football clubs, will have looked at Dominic Calvert-Lewin's season last season and thought, actually, do you know what? He was out for the majority of last season. Now, Dominic Calvert-Lewin scored 5 goals last season. Now, I can remember him scoring 3 in the opening 3 games. He scored against Southampton, he scored against Leeds, and he scored against Brighton away from home. He then spent pretty much the entirety of the season out. He must have scored 1 in between this. I can't remember off the top of my head. But then he scored the next one against Crystal Palace, which, of course, was the penultimate game of the season, the header that kept Everton in the Premier League. So over the entire season, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, other than the first 3 games, was effectively out-injured. Now, luckily enough, we had Richarlison. Luckily enough, we had other players that were chipping in there. Now, if there was anybody at this football club with an ounce of, an ounce of intelligence or an ounce of sort of forward thinking, they'd have looked at that and gone, you know what? Dom's really suffered this year with repeat injuries. With injuries that have come up, after during his recovery, he's had another little injury, or he's had another little problem, or he's had another little, issue here and there. So let's actually go out and get a striker to ensure that if that happens again, we're not reliant on Dominic Calvert-Lewin. But we didn't. We sat there and we said, well, we'll be all right this season because Dom is back. Dom is back fit, so we'll be all right. It'll be no problem. We don't need to worry about it. He's had a bad season, but he'll be back fit now. Nobody at that football club said, but hang on, what happens if he has another season like this one? Now, we're forgetting that Dominic Calvert-Lewin had a really, really good 6 months under Carlo Ancelotti. In Carlo Ancelotti's first full season, towards the back end of the season before, and his first full season, he had a really good 12-month period. The second half of Carlo Ancelotti's first season, he wasn't great. And then last season was the season that he spent the majority of it out injured. So nobody thought, but what if Dom gets another injury and then keeps getting these, little niggly injuries left, right and centre and ultimately is out for a long period of time next season as well? What are we going to do then, considering we haven't got Richarlison anymore? Nobody thought that. It was just a complete, as I said, the only way I can describe it is neglect of the situation. Sitting back thinking, well, we'll be all right because we'll have Dom fit all season. And the whole discussion this season, in pre-season, when we were in America, and throughout the course of the entirety of the season, up to this point, really, when it's become quite evident that Dom isn't going to be available for a lot of games, the whole discussion was, we'll be all right if Dom stays fit. How is a Premier League football club that has just survived relegation by 4 points, 5 points, barely stayed in the division on the penultimate day of the season, relying on it if? How is it being allowed that the fact that of Everton remaining in the Premier League is an if and not an absolute cert? It shouldn't have been we'll be okay if Dominic Calvert-Lewin stays with. It should have been we'll be okay because. And it was never because Dominic Calvert-Lewin will stay fit, because that wasn't a guarantee. So it should have been we'll be all right because we've brought this striker in who's capable of scoring goals. And if that striker comes in and then gets a long-term injury, then we sort of sit here and we go, how unlucky is that? They tried to make they tried to bring somebody in to sort of take the pressure off Dom. We didn't do that. It was always a if. And that if is obviously now being proven to not be the case. And what we're now living is effectively last season, where Dominic Calvert-Lewin is constantly out with injuries and will come back and play a game or two, might nick a goal like he did against Palace, mightn't, and then he'll go out again for another 2-3 months with an injury. So, for me, as I've said before, and I will say it again, Everton should have, 12 months ago, certainly in the summer and certainly in January, should have replaced Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Not brought another striker in to be the understudy to Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Everton should have replaced Dominic Calvert-Lewin. It's as simple as that. Everton have to plan for a future without Dom. And that's not me having a go at him. And that's not me picking on him. And that's not me saying sell him, he's useless, he's this, he's that, he's the other. No, keep Dominic Calvert-Lewin at the football club. Keep him there, but replace him. Go and get a number 9 that can come in and play every week. That's better than Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And then you say to Dom, listen, absolutely no pressure on you. Get yourself back to fitness. Get yourself back to a decent level. Get yourself back to a level of match fitness. And then you can go and compete with that striker. And then we've got a new striker who's hopefully scoring goals and playing well and fit every week. And then you've got Dominic Calvert-Lewin to come and compete with that new striker. It's not difficult. It's not a personal thing towards Dom, because you just say, listen, we can't afford to rely on you when you're picking up injuries left, right and centre. So we've got to go and get somebody better. And then when you return and when you're fit again, you'll get your chance to show that you're good enough to be in this team, and you can either compete with this new fella or you can play alongside him. We have to move on from Dominic Calvert-Lewin now. We should have in the summer and we didn't. And we're now sitting here scraping wins left, right and centre. And, let's be honest, who knows when Dominic Calvert-Lewin will return? Who knows? He was getting better. I know the managers say we need to sort of watch him, and I'm sort of aiming for after the international break. But the manager basically confirmed in yesterday's press conference that he's picked up another little knock, or he's feeling a little bit tight, this, that and the other. I'm at this point with Dom now where it's never a surprise. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not frustrated anymore. It's not a surprise. If Dominic Calvert-Lewin doesn't play another game for Everton this season, I won't be surprised. But we shouldn't be in a position where we're all sitting here absolutely shitting ourselves at that thought. We should be sitting here going, oh, fucking hell, poor Dom. It's unfortunate that. But at least we're not relying on him. We've got this, that, and we've got this player, we've got this striker in now. No, we're relying on a player who showed us last season that he can't be relied on. Now, that's no fault of his own, that's fine, but it doesn't matter whether it's a fault of his own or whether it's not. That's the matter of fact. And yet, the negligence of this board and these people that run this football club have allowed this to happen again. And once again, our Premier League status has been judged on an if. And that if might just see us get relegated this season. So, there you go. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Really interesting to hear your thoughts on this subject and this topic. Because, yeah, maybe I'm just completely viewing it wrong. Maybe I'm viewing it right. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you have enjoyed it, please hit that like button. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe. Everton play Chelsea tomorrow. Preview is up now. Go and check it out. And obviously all of the post-match day content will be up after the game. But big thanks for watching. Leave a like if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. And we'll see you later.